G'day everyone, Matt Ellis with you for another edition of the Cricket Library podcast, and a very special treat for us today, an Australian-born Englishman.
Steve Waugh could be out. Yes, first ball. Well, Hollioake gets two, change of pace. He chipped it straight to mid-off, and all of a sudden, England back in the hunt. In fact, they're on top.
They are. A change of pace has done it. And from feeling desolation at one stage, England now are right on top again. Two quick wickets. Good slower ball, deceived Steve Waugh completely.
Adam Hollioake is a story you do not want to miss. He's ridden the highs and the lows of life. He has plenty of wisdom to share about how he's dealt with the setbacks and celebrated the achievements along the way. We even get to hear a little story about Chris Rock and Viv Richards. It's time to sit back, relax and enjoy the Adam Hollioake story. A very warm welcome to the Cricket Library podcast. Adam Hollioake, thanks so much for joining us.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Now, we love to start with all of our guests. We're pretty much a group of cricket nuffies that listen to this podcast, and we love to know the origins of people's love for the game. And you've done a lot of things in your life, and you're not just defined by your cricket. But can you give us a little bit of an insight into growing up when you first realised you loved cricket?
Well, okay. Firstly, I guess probably to give you an idea, my dad was a young, he played for the Victorian Country 11 back in the day. So, but he did also play for the Melbourne Demons in the AFL. So,
wow.
So he was quite sporty. And at this stage, from the ages 0 till 12, we were kind of traveling a lot before my dad settled in England for 6 years. We were traveling, so we were a lot of times living in caravans and, traveling around Europe and there were lots of different places. So I don't have, some guy, I'm probably guessed you've got on there that have memories of playing in the backyard. I didn't have a backyard really, so
yeah,
we were just different. So it was always my dad. My earliest memories of my dad throwing balls to me, and we're just playing games of cricket just wherever we could play it. So quite just pretty wholesome kind of memories from. I didn't play my first ever game of cricket until I was 12.
Wow.
So because we were traveling so much, but I just always just played in the backyard with my dad or wherever we could play. So, and I know my brother was the same because obviously he was with us. So it's kind of a unique, less formal entry into the game as most kids, I think, just due to the nature of our sort of nomadic childhood.
Yeah, and do you think that nomadic lifestyle helped shape your personality?
It's amazing that you should bring that up because I've literally been thinking that very thing. I've kind of been doing a little bit of a journey into myself, as in trying to understand myself a little bit better. And I'm actually presently in London over here, following the Ashes round and doing some other work and stuff. And I'm just literally going from hotel to hotel, from friend's house to friend's house, and I'm just so comfortable with it. So very comfortable sleeping in different beds every night and just not really having a home base. And I was thinking about my childhood. I was thinking, I think that's probably what made me be my most comfortable whilst moving around. And, and that was one area of cricket that I never, you hear some guys, they hate living out of a suitcase or, that was just one area which I was totally comfortable with. And I guess I put that down to my childhood.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting into professional cricket, you represent England at under 19 level. How did it feel for you, born in Australia? Did you think of yourself as an Aussie growing up, or because you were moving around and whatever, what was your, I guess, how did you consider yourself when you're given that England cap?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I remember a distinct moment because you're right. I grew up, from ages 0 to 12. I grew up predominantly in Australia and around Australian kids, and with my parents who are naturalized Australians. So I always knew the names to the Australian anthem. I knew the words to the Australian anthem, and I knew the Australian history because I'd studied that at school. So I guess I felt pretty Australian, but without ever feeling that real affinity with Australia. And this is the way my whole life I've been very defensive about this topic because I'd always been accused of being a traitor, this guy who was born in Australia, raised in Australia, and then only went to play for England because he wasn't good enough to play for Australia. That's the narrative that's out there.
Yeah.
And I'd always just tried to defend that. And then one day I went, why am I defending this? Like, it's not my fault. I was a kid. And I actually got on the front foot and I said, you know what? And I thought about it. It's like, I feel cheated that, well, not cheated, that's probably a bit harsh, but I would have loved to feel that affinity with one country and be able to go out there before a game and sing their national anthem and sing it and just feel so patriotic. I see guys crying during the national anthems and, just that feeling. You can see the proud. I never had that because I'd never felt that playing for England, and I never would have felt that playing for Australia either. I don't have that affinity with one country because I just travelled so much as a kid, and I'd learnt to play cricket in England. My parents and my upbringing was Australian in a lot of the ways, but I don't feel if I'd been picked for Australia or England, I never would have had that burning affinity with that one country, and I don't think that should be my fault, really.
Yeah,
that was just the nature of my upbringing, and it wasn't like I was trying to diddle the system and go and try and play. That was just the way it was. So I used to get very defensive about it. Now I'm like, you know what? It is what it is, and why should I be defending this? It was just, I wish I had that. I wish I'd felt that connection with one country, but I just don't. So doesn't mean I didn't try my hardest though.
and on a cricket side of things, is it true you started out as predominantly a fast bowler and then you had some stress fractures and gave you some time to sort of concentrate on your batting, and you sort of picked up that skill set as an all-rounder in that time where you were dealing with that injury?
Good research. That was very good research. I think because I was quite young that happened. I think I was an out-and-out fast bowler, and my goal in life, my ambition was to be the fastest bowler in the world. And probably at the age of 15, 16, I was on track to do that. I used to bowl very quick. We're not saying I was the fastest in the world at that age, but I was, if I'd carried on progressing at the rate I was, I could have been, one of the faster bowlers going around. But I did get a stress fracture, and then back, whilst these days they're handled well, I was on and off, and I just carried on playing and for a period of 2 years. But what a lot of people don't know is I actually smashed my ankle as well, which is more the problem, because I came to the stress fracture. But because I'd been out for so long, people thought that was the reason why I couldn't bowl as fast. But it was actually I shattered my left ankle in a water skiing accident. So a bad water skiing accident, as in my water skiing was bad, which caused the accident. And I was never able to really slam my foot down again. And during that time, I did learn to bat. So that's pretty much spot on with your research.
Oh, there you go. It's always, if I'm calling myself the cricket library, I feel if my research isn't very good, then I probably need a new name. So I'm glad that was accurate.
Well, I'm impressed that that is very good research.
And stepping up into international cricket, you get into the one-day international side initially. You debut against Pakistan, and then you get to play against Australia. And I'm sorry to just backtrack a little bit here. I just want to read you something that Stephen Waugh said about you playing in a game against them in '97, one of the early one-day internationals in your career, your player of the series in this series. And Steve Waugh says, if there's one thing that gets an Australian side fired up more than a Pommy walking to the wicket, it's an ex-Aussie in Pommy colours walking to the wicket. But on this occasion, his desire, application and determination proved too much for our attack. So that, for context, that was a game. Actually, your parents flew over to that game, and I think in the newspaper the following day, you said something like you're out there batting and you hit a boundary, then you look up on the big screen and you saw your mum and dad. What do you remember about that?
Well, I'll tell you what I do remember is your research is outstanding, because that's I'd actually forgotten about that myself, but you brought that back into my memory. For you guys in Australia now, they're like, you've got the big screens, and those things have been up at the MCG and the big grounds for ages. But back in those days, the screens, the portable ones, the temporary ones, only started going up around that time. So it was quite a new thing to have a big TV or a big screen at the grounds. And I remember batting and then looking up and seeing my mum and I thought, I recognise those people. I thought, holy shit, that's my mum and dad. They're here. So I didn't know they'd just flown over to come and watch. So I knew they were coming, but I didn't expect to see them on the screen while I was batting.
Yeah. And is it true? Like, I get the feeling, following from afar, the England media love to hype things up, and you guys won this one-day series. There's a lot of talk around England winning the Ashes. As a player, is it hard not to get caught up in all of that? Are you someone who would have read the papers, stayed away from the papers? What was your approach to dealing with the hype in and around a big series like an Ashes series?
So I started off, that's a good question again, and I started off reading the newspapers. And then, as every teenage kid or early 20-year-old kid did, I started seeing some bad reports written about myself, and I wasn't able to separate myself from it. So I used to get angry, and how could they write that about me when they're just doing their job? And then, so then I went through the stage of not reading it, because I thought it upsets me, and it makes me angry, and probably not a good thing to want to fight journalists. So I then went through a period of trying to avoid reading the media or anything like that, or listening to it. And then I got to the point where maybe, and again, I just evolved again, and I was like, hey, people are entitled to their opinion, and if people don't think I'm any good, that's fine. I've got to learn to live with that. And I guess I matured again, and then I went to the point where I started reading it again. So I went through a couple of different phases in my life, and to the point by the end of it, I'd become so desensitized to it. Whenever I saw a negative article about me or anything like that, I'd cut it out and put it on my wall. So a lot of people put that. You go to people's houses and they've got the big headlines and the positive stuff up there. I was the opposite. I used to cut out the negative stuff, put it up there, and I found that desensitized me to anything that was written about me anyway. So, and to this day, even I've got a couple of negative articles about me up on my wall. So it just it keeps me humbled, as I have the tendency to get a little bit above myself. So it keeps me, and then it also reminds me not to take myself too seriously. So
yeah,
that's my motive. That's my reason for that.
Yeah, and later in that one-day series, your brother Ben gets to make his debut. I think that game's at Lord's, and he towels up the Aussies. As an older brother, watching on and getting to see that firsthand and see your little brother play so well, what are your reflections on that?
Well, that's an interesting story, actually, because, obviously we grew up, like I said, as I alluded to earlier, we travelled around a lot. So we built up a very close bond because, I had no one to play cricket with a lot of the time, so I had to play with him. I'm 6 years older than him. So as a 12-year-old, I'm playing cricket with a 6-year-old, and that's probably the reason why he was so advanced at such a young age. But they came to me and they said, listen, we're going to pick him. He's only 19 or something at the time, or 18 or 19 or something like that. And I remember thinking, man, he's good, he's talented, but he's not ready for the Australians. The Australians were, far and away the best side in the world at the time. And whilst he'd, incredibly talented kid, I said, there's no way he's going to be able to, deal with, the Warnes and the McGraths and the Gillespies of this world at that age. So when they picked him, I said, look, I don't think he's ready, but, you do what you're going to do. He's going to be ready soon. So, but they picked him. And then I remember that day he came out to bat at 3, I think. And I stayed at the back of the changing room. I didn't want to see it because in my mind, I also, I never got nervous. I did get nervous because I got nervous, but I didn't get as nervous as I did when I watched him play. So stayed at the back of the changing room because I was kind of worried about what was going to happen out there. And then the first boundary came, and I was watching it on the tally from back inside. And then as more and more boundaries started happening, I sort of ventured out onto the balcony, puffing my chest out as if I knew he was going to do this. So, and it was just one of the most proudest and most, and probably the most entertaining innings I've ever seen. So, obviously I'm biased, and it's, I was invested in it more than most, but it's still probably my favourite innings I've watched in my life. So, amazing.
Because it was 1997, and he hit 60 odd off 40 something balls in an era where 60 off 90 was a good clip. So it was kind of ahead of its time.
Yeah, it was. And it wasn't him necessarily trying to be, overly attacking or whatever. He was just such an incredible hitter of a cricket ball, just a timer of a cricket ball, and completely unfazed by, imagine, Glenn McGrath and Shane Warne as a 19-year-old. He'd been growing up watching these guys decimate best batting lineups in the world, all around the world. So to just do what he did, I remember he just pumped McGrath that day, and then just decided he was going to get into Warney as well. So pretty remarkable, really. Yeah,
absolutely. And later that summer, two brothers make their Test debut. Describe the emotion around that for you, your family. What did it mean to you? What does it still mean to you?
That's really interesting because I think because of the way the previous year had gone for me and my brother, it just didn't seem as like a big deal at the time. I mean, it did. I'm not going to say it didn't seem like nothing, but it just seemed evident and inevitable that it was going to happen. I mean, I'd captained England A out to Australia, and we won undefeated out there. And my brother had played in England under 19s and been successful there. He'd been coming to the Surrey side. We'd both been successful playing for Surrey. And then obviously the series, I got man of the series in that series against Australia, and then my brother got man of the match in that game. And it was just, for us, it was a kind of when are we going to play, not right if. It was like we just knew it was a matter of time before we played, and that's what we felt. That's the sort of momentum we were on. So when it actually happened, it didn't seem like that big a deal. I mean, it just seemed inevitable that was going to happen. And whilst of course still a big moment, I don't think I actually realised the gravity of the occasion probably until about 4 or 5 years ago, when I was reading an article, and it was I think Sam and Tom Curran played a game together or something like that, and they were saying they're the first brothers to play a game for England since the Hollioake boys, and then before that, and we were the only brothers that have made their debut together that century or something. So I was like, wow, it's actually quite a big deal. But at the time, it just didn't. I mean, it did, of course. You test that debut, of course it did, but I don't think I actually realised how big a deal it was.
Yeah. And what do you remember about your introduction to Test cricket from the Australians? I assume they would have been nice and friendly to you and giving you a nice warm welcome out in the middle?
as they do. I wouldn't expect anything else. It's like I grew up in Australia. I'm of the same belief. So, yeah, I came out to bat there, and I knew, especially off the back of the one-day series, I knew that there was a target on my head. And I came out to bat, and I thought they might let me take guard first. But so we had Ian Healy wicket-keeping, Mark Taylor first slip, Mark Waugh second slip, Steve Waugh third slip, Michael Slater gully. They're all there, and they're all pretty fired up. They just got a couple of wickets, and I'd come to the crease with a fired-up Glenn McGrath. So I'm trying to get my composure and trying to stay present and just ignore all these guys I'd grown up watching as my heroes and just try and focus on the ball. I was just trying to focus me and the ball. And then the hand clapping came from behind. Come on then, boys, let's have this guy out. Here he is, making his Test debut. All his family watching on TV. Back in Australia. Wishing he was playing for Australia. His Uncle Rex, Auntie Jan, and then they started reeling off the names of all my family. So I was like, holy shit, how do they know them? And then, so I'm meant to be focusing on the ball, and as Glenn McGrath's running in, it's like, how do they know Uncle Rex? So some very good banter. And it was Warnie who mentioned Auntie Jan. And I was like, in my mind, has Warnie slept with my Auntie Jan? It was some pretty good mind games. Because the object of sledging, everyone thinks it's just abuse, but it's to pretty much take the batsman out of their game and take them out from being present and take you out from just sitting there and watching the ball. I've got things spinning around in my head instead of watching the ball. So
yeah.
Some pretty good stuff for boys there. I was impressed with that.
Yeah, very, very impressive. And you toured the West Indies. I wanted to ask you about a game over there, a Test match that's abandoned on day one.
Yeah.
Are you disappointed that you didn't get to bat?
I don't know. No, I'm actually not. I was watching. There was about an hour that I think we played of that game, and that wicket was like nothing else I've ever seen. So I've played on dangerous. We all played on dangerous wickets. You know what I mean? There's nothing special about dangerous wickets. We've all been there and played on them, but this one was so fast. And they had Ambrose, Walsh, Kenny Benjamin, and I think Nixon McLean, who are all very handy fast bowlers.
I think it was Nixon McLean's Test debut, actually. Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So their attack was like that. And then we had Angus Fraser, who's not very fast, Andy Caddick, who's maybe a little bit quick, myself, who was 70 miles, 120 kilometres an hour and short, and Phil Tufnell. So we weren't exactly putting the fear into people like Brian Lara or Jimmy Adams. So, but this wicket was terrifying. So it was length ball. There was like, can you imagine a corrugated roof would be the best way I could describe it.
Oh, wow.
So it would hit, if it hit the upslope, it flew your head. If it hit the downslope, it went straight along the floor. And fast it was doing it. So it wasn't doing it slowly, it was doing it quickly. So it was abandoned after an hour. So, there's no way you could play it. Someone would have been maimed, so not a good wicket.
And the physio would have been racking up the step count running out into the middle every time someone got hit.
Yeah, he was very present on TV. I think he was a household name after that. The amount of time he had on TV. Yeah, it was a remarkable scene really.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about captaincy. You take on the Surrey captaincy at age 23. You have the opportunity to captain England after 5 games. 3 of those is a player of the series for you. Talk about. I'd be interested to know your approach to captaincy and how it sort of changed over time through your experience from being the 23-year-old doing it for the first time to how it evolved and what it was like when you finished?
Well, firstly, when I got offered the captaincy of Surrey at the age of 23, I thought there was someone standing behind me because I'd never, when they asked me to do it, I'd never been captain of any sports team. I played a lot of sport growing up, but I'd always been a rebellious, outspoken, naughty, I guess, person. So when they came to me and asked me to do it, I literally thought it was either I was on candid camera, or it was April Fools, or there was someone that they were talking to that was standing behind me, because I was not captaincy material. I'm very fiery and passionate.
Yep.
But probably the point of being so passionate that I didn't have my emotions under control. I was often fighting. On a Friday, Saturday night, I was, I was not captaincy material. But for whatever reason, when I got given the responsibilities, and they must have seen something in me, I guess. I think I've always been, an influential personality. So I think they thought if they could mould me into a more productive, then I could be influential for a better way. So it ended up being that way, and I think probably the greatest thing I did as a captain was acknowledge that I didn't know everything about it, and that I needed the help of the senior players to help me with it, because I was still learning the game myself. And then it kind of worked. I'm an enthusiastic person, and I guess my enthusiasm coupled with, I guess, in that I'm not necessarily the most humble person most of the time, but I guess my humbleness in that particular instance of saying, look, I don't know everything and I need your help. It kind of worked well. And then I in answer to the question of did my captaincy change, yes, well, I became way more confident with the job because we had success quite early on. And then I think captaincy is just something that you generally get better at with experience anyway. So I actually matured into like I sort of intimated before, I was a very emotional person. I kind of matured into someone who had quite a lot of control over their emotions in the end. So that changed quite a lot. So I think captaincy changed that for me.
Yeah, and something like 9 trophies at Surrey. What are the common threads that lead to success? I guess what are the things that you look back on and go, yeah, these are the things that helped us to be the powerhouse that we were?
There's a very, very, very easy answer to that, and that is I had the best team. I had the best batsmen, the best bowlers, and the best fielders. So the starting point was, very, I was fortunate. A lot of people, think that I took a bunch of deadbeats and turned them into this crack outfit that just was invincible. Like, that's not the case. We had the most talented playing roster and the best players. And that said, there's been a lot of very talented teams that haven't reached their potential. So I think having those players, I'm under no illusions that I wouldn't be able to take a normal group of people and achieve that. I know that it's off the back of their brilliance, and it was an elite group of individuals that just happened to be there all at the same time. So number one thing, and I always pay respect, is to the players. That was the most important thing.
Yeah, and must have been a real pleasure to play with such a talented group.
Yeah, well, there was one stage where we had 13 international players on our squad. 13, so you only get 11 teams. So we had 2 guys who played either sitting on the sides or playing in the second. So The hardest job of captaining that side, often, other than controlling all the egos, was managing the expectations of people. Just because you play for England doesn't guarantee you're going to get picked for Surrey.
Yeah.
So don't forget we were allowed over players as well. So we had 2 players from international players.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And just moving on to more personal part of your story, the tragedy when you lose your brother in a car accident. Can you just reflect on the impact that had at the time and the impact that still has on you as a human being, and what you've learned about life from having to deal with such a hard thing?
Yeah, sure. I mean, firstly, the impact it had on me is profound. I always say that if you take a toy off of your, we were talking before about your kids,
Yeah.
If you take a toy off your 2-year-old or 3, when they're 2 or 3, and take a toy off them, they go to pieces. And if you say you're not getting this for a day because you misbehave, they literally throw themselves down on the floor and they're crying, because that's the thing that's ever happened to them.
Yeah.
Then after a period of time, they realise, okay, well, I'll get it back tomorrow. So then the next time you take the toy off them, they learn to deal with it. So they become more resilient every time they have to go through hardship. So, and that becomes, as we go through life, we hit harder and harder things. We get older, or people die, illness, financial troubles, love, all these things, we lose along the way. So at the age of, my brother dying at 24 and I was still quite young, the only thing that had happened, probably the worst thing that had happened to me before that was, other than my best friend also dying in a car crash, was I scored a duck in a game of cricket or something like that. So I had left such a blessed life that hit me so hard. It was just in comparison to everything else that had happened to me. So, it was traumatic. It was. I wasn't prepared for it. I wasn't, and I guess I've been on that journey ever since, and learned how to deal with it, how to not let it destroy me, and now probably to the point, probably in the last 4 or 5 years, I've just come to terms with it, and it's now there's never a total positive out of a tragedy like that, but I guess the one thing now is I do feel that anything that gets thrown at me is I'm going to be able to deal with. So I always say, you can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want to me. I'm not scared of anything. Leave my kids alone. Don't hurt my kids. And anything else I'll deal with. I'm going to take my leg. I've had to deal with stuff in life which has prepared me for and got me into this fortunate position where I'm not scared of anything. So I'm not scared of dying myself. I'm not scared of I've suffered financial loss. I've lost in love. So I've even started to lose my hair. How about that? so I'm not fearful of loss. I just the only thing is my kids now. I just want, God willing, that they remain healthy during my lifetime, and I don't have to deal with that. And it's given me resilience beyond what I could ever have thought I'd be able to achieve.
Yeah, and it's a really hard way to be shaped, I guess, and it happens in everyone's life at different stages. We have things like that happen, and it's never easy at all. Well, what do you remember most about your brother? What makes you smile? What sort of things about Ben did you love the most?
Well, he was just an incredibly relaxed guy. He was someone that we could just chill out. Because, we could sit there and we'd compete and anything, or we could sit there in silence and just be comfortable with one another. He's a very laid-back individual. I'm pretty laid-back myself, so I feel like there's no two brothers in the history of the world who have been able to chill the way he and I could chill. So that's something. And probably my abiding memory is the competitiveness that we have with one another, whether we're playing table tennis or a game of pool or a game of darts, whatever, we were always competing. So probably one thing that I was talking to my mum about this the other day, and I reminded her, we were both sponsored by Nike, and we got given a bunch of apparel that wasn't probably Nike's top selling line. I would have thought some very boring t-shirts, but there was one t-shirt, and we got given an absolute bounty of them. So I got given 40 t-shirts. He got given 40 t-shirts, something like that, and but there was one which was a standout t-shirt, and I claimed it got given to me. He claimed it got given to him. Years, like we just stole it off one another. So he would say, I'd take it and I'd put it in my bag, and we never once confronted each other about it. It was just this game that we had going on that I'd steal it off him, he'd steal it off me, and this went on for ages. And eventually, when he died, I remember we had to go and like clear his stuff up and what have you. And I went there, and the little bastard, he had the t-shirt, didn't he? So like, he won the game. He won the game. So that's what I remember there about that. He's a funny guy.
Oh, yeah, good memories. And life after cricket. So much of your life is cricket, but I look at your bio, and what haven't you done? Like MMA.
Well, I haven't done.
Well, one thing you haven't done, WWE. Did you ever think of WWE as a career path?
I did actually get asked by the WWE if I was interested, but it was after my MMA career, and I was like, man, I've got to grow up at some stage, so I can't. I'm trying to get through a real job, but I thought, the WWE might be a step too far. So,
I thought that you in the WWE would have been bringing the fans back for sure.
Yeah, I'm not so sure they're interested in fat Polynesians or The Rock,
Yeah, if you were in the WWE, this is totally off track. If you were in the WWE, do you see yourself being a baby face or a heel? Because you played a pretty good heel role in Australia. You got they booed the house down sometimes when you were around, didn't they? When you came to play in Australia, do you reckon you'd embrace that if you were in the WWE?
I think so. I'd have to be. I think it would depend. If it was in Australia, then I'd definitely. I actually used to join in. I think I had one day. I think we had the world record crowd at the MCG. It was like 95,000 people at the time, and I think I had the whole crowd singing "Hollioake the Wanker." So I joined in. I was like, well, these, quite a catchy little song. So I'd have to be the heel, I'd say.
Yeah. And what are you up to now? What's your what's life looking like for you now? Where do you see things headed? What's on your roadmap, I guess?
I guess I think now I'm probably at the happiest I've been. I mean, I think when something happens to you, like what happened with my brother, you go through a number of things, and I probably realized that I'm never going to be as happy as I was before that, and that's just I'm not going to be able to achieve that level of happiness, but I can still be the happiest that I can be moving forward. So probably this is now the happiest I've been. I've had some financial. I made some I got caught out in the global financial crash, and a few other things go wrong, and so I think now I've got a really nice balance. I've got a couple of boys. My two sons are both elite rugby players.
Yep.
And I'm enjoying time training them, trying to get them into the NRL, and enjoying the challenge of that. I do a bit of coaching with Queensland Bulls. And then I've just opened the microbrewery in Mermaid Beach. So,
very nice.
I thought that might get your attention. So, anytime I mention beer and to an Australian male, then it's generally like gets their attention. We've opened a microbrewery up down there in Mermaid Beach on the Gold Coast, and that's taking up a bit of my time as well. So between, training the Queensland Bulls batsmen, I've trained some fighters out of Matrix Boxing Gym on the Gold Coast, and then the microbrewery. I'm pretty busy, and then with my two boys, training them as well. So it's a nice mix of things that keeps me. I'm 100% ADHD, so
Yeah.
I need sort of things to keep me focused and on path. So yeah, I feel like I'm actually achieving that at the moment.
Oh, that's really good to hear. And you over for the whole Ashes tour? Are you going to be there for the duration?
I'm here till the end of August, so I'm here beyond the end of the Ashes. So it's what a series it's shaping up to be. So I'm looking forward to that. And then I'm doing some other stuff over here as well, catching up with my old club Surrey, which again tonight they've got a game against Middlesex. So going down to watch that and just enjoying catching up with all my old friends that I made over here during my time here.
Oh, brilliant. And speaking of catching up with old friends, our signature question to guests is around the idea of a dream net session. If you could have a dream net session, you can invite anyone you want. Who is Adam Hollioake inviting to the nets?
How many in there?
You're allowed 3.
One.
You're allowed 3. So your top 3 picks.
Oh.
Don't have to be cricketers. They can be from any walk of life. You can ask whoever
so
you
I don't
want.
have to play cricket?
No, no.
Well, okay, I'm going to bring Viv along because he's probably my favourite cricketer and also one of my favourite people. So Viv's there.
Did you get
Mike Tyson along?
Oh, yes.
I just think whatever happens there, he's always makes things interesting. It's never going to be boring while he's around.
You bring your ear guards for your helmet?
Yeah, that's make sure I've got the visor on. So I definitely want those ears protected. Another one. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe. I mean, I fancy myself as an intellectual these days. I try and sound intelligent, even though I'm quite clearly not. So I'm a bit of a Jordan Peterson fan. So maybe just and what a crowd as well. Viv, Mike Tyson, and Jordan Peterson. Like how? How could you not have?
That would be a very eclectic conversation. I'd really enjoy that, actually.
Yeah. I'm imagining Jordan Peterson psychoanalyzing Mike Tyson. I think it'd be brilliant.
Yeah, that'd be really good. And Viv, did you have much to do with Viv throughout your career? What are your memories of Viv?
Well, I did actually. He's become quite a close friend of mine. So my memories of Viv are, regardless of who's the greatest cricketing, but I mean people are going to say Bradman's the greatest. But for me, Viv is that person. He's the Muhammad Ali. I mean, was Muhammad Ali the greatest great boxer of all time? I don't know, but he's the greatest person. And I feel Viv falls into that category. So I think you'd have to be hard pressed to say that anyone was better than Don Bradman. But as a human being, I just love everything Viv stood for, the way he played the game. Like I said, I was one of those weird children that didn't have pictures of bikini-clad women on their walls. I had posters of Viv on my wall. So, and I'm just fortunate that he's become a close friend of mine. So, I've got a very good Viv Richards story.
Yeah.
So, caught up with him in Sydney. It was, what's the name of it? There's a bar. I can't remember the name of it. It's the establishment in Sydney. It's a very nice bar. And I was sitting on a sofa, and Viv was just a man of respect. He's the man of respect. His manners, integrity, he's impeccable. So I'm sitting there, and I was with another friend of mine who's a good boxer. My best friend is a very good fighter, and so we're sitting there, and I look to my left, and Chris Rock has rolled into the establishment. So he sits down, and Chris and Viv acknowledge each other. I don't think Chris knew who Viv was, or maybe that he did. They nodded to each other, and it might have just been a acknowledgement of cultures. I'm not sure. Anyway, so I was like, holy hell, that's Chris Rock. So we're sitting there, and the next minute, Viv starts absolutely going off, like talking to him like Chris Rock's his son. He's like, "Hey man, get your feet down off it." So Chris Rock had taken his shoe off and had his foot under his on the sofa under his. So he pulled his foot up underneath his, like he was almost sitting on his foot.
Yeah.
And Viv started full on confronting him like he was his son or something like that. And Chris Rock, I couldn't believe it. I talked, and Chris Rock had a couple of security there.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, this is it. It's going to be on here. But Chris Rock just pulled his foot down. He put his foot down on the floor, and that was it. And we were like, okay, we just carry on. It was like, Viv just told Chris what's happening.
That's outstanding. That is a very good note for us to finish on, Adam. Thank you so much for being so open and so honest with us, and thanks for taking us on the journey. I learnt lots about you, and I'm sure our listeners will really get a lot out of hearing your story, and really appreciate you taking the time to do so.
No worries, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
A massive thanks to Adam Hollioake for sharing his story with us on the Cricket Library podcast today. A very full life he is living, and a great perspective on things, and really thankful for him sharing that perspective with us here on the Cricket Library podcast today. If you enjoyed that chat, hit the subscribe button, share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it, and make sure you stay up to date with all the happenings here at the library at thecricketlibrary.com. There will be some announcements coming about future guests, so that's where you will see them first. Well, it's time for me to bid you all farewell. This has been Matt Ellis for the Cricket Library podcast. Bye for now.